Okay, so there we have the finished Hive Tyrant. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now you might be wondering what else is on the channel. So the main focus of this channel, although we are doing painting videos at the moment, is actually battling and tactical decisions. So we're taking a fresh approach to how to play Warhammer. And that means that we're going to be using very technical mathematics to model algorithms to actually play Warhammer. So this is a pretty hardcore mathematical channel on how to play and win Warhammer 40k. It's a bit like Math Hammer, but it's a lot more real world and it's got a lot more application. So you might be also wondering, how are we getting real world into Warhammer? So the main reason why we can do this is because we're using financial markets to place the Warhammer players. So what that means is, for example now, say you have two currencies, such as maybe euros and dollars. So the euros can be interpreted as maybe space marines, and the dollars can be maybe interpreted as a different type of army, such as Tyranids or Tau or Orcs or whatever you want to play it as. So we then use how the derivative is changing, so that is the financial derivative, which is the price of the underlying currency or the ratio of euros to dollars. As that changes throughout the day, we then change the players in the game. So these are very large games, and we're using a lot of computer software to generate these games in real time, which will then be streamed onto our YouTube channel. So what we're really doing at the moment is painting up our miniature range and getting people interested in our channel for the future. So the best is yet to come, and we are looking forward to starting the live stream in the next couple of weeks. Hi, welcome to this video on painting a Hive Tyrant for the Tyranid army. In this video I've already assembled the model, and I've also undercoated it in a grey from Vallejo model air range. Once I've done that, I've then airbrushed it with Ushabti Bone, and then I've lightly airbrushed it with Screaming Skull, which is why it's a bit lighter than Ushabti Bone. Now with the Screaming Skull, I didn't completely coat the miniature, so I just airbrushed mainly the gun, the whip and a few of the arms. So it was a lighter airbrush effect that I got with using the Screaming Skull. So the next stage now, I'm going to get Emperor's Children pink, and I'm going to mix it with a bit of water. I'm going to use quite a bit of water, and then I'm just going to glaze the miniature in the recesses. Okay, so I've now mixed up my Emperor's Children pink, and I'm going to begin glazing the miniature. So to do this, I'm mainly going to be looking at the recesses. I'm going to be using a few more pinks after this, but I just thought I'd lightly wash the miniature with this to give it a first light coat, and then take it darker as we go forward. So I'm going to need quite a bit of this colour. Now you can mix it with water, or you can use like a paint thinner. That would be fine. Okay, so you can see there, I'm building up the pink. So I'm just going to try these areas. Let's see if we've got a bristle. Now I'd say that line there that I've just done is a bit thick. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get some water, put a load of water on my brush, and I'm just going to put the water droplet on there and just drag it down. I'm now thinking that this pink might be still too much pigment in the water. So I've probably mixed it up a bit dark, a bit too strong, and you're probably better off doing a couple of coats. A couple of really thin coats would be better than just one coat. So quite a lot of water. I think you're better off underdoing it rather than overdoing it. Remember, we're going to take this model much darker with the pinks eventually, so the darkest recesses will probably be going quite dark. So the main areas to keep the pigment on are probably the further out recesses, so the recesses which are nearer the highlighted regions. Those areas are going to be more of this will be showing. So we're starting sort of back to front and then going to go into the pools with a darker colour. And then at the end, I probably won't touch this model up with Ushabti Bone, but obviously you could if you wanted to. So at the moment I'm just trying to get into the sort of behind the head part. Because I'm just mixing up a bit more of the pink because I've run out. The next region, I've got a Carnifex, and it looks much better if you don't coat the whole arm, you just do those little bits. Okay, so notice that I didn't bother doing the whole arm like I have. I've done a bit too much pink, you could argue, on the main bit. But I think as long as we have a nice bit of cream still showing on the arms, we're still going to keep the bulk of the colour that we just spent a long time airbrushing. So these took quite a long time to airbrush in Screaming Skull and Ushabti Bone. So it's important that we don't completely get rid of that colour completely. We still want to see some Ushabti Bone, some Screaming Skull in there. So we don't want to completely drench the miniature in this wash. Now if you want a more of a shine to this colour we're putting on, you need to mix it with paint thinner. I've just mixed it with water for this video, but obviously if you want a bigger shine, more glossy effect for the Tyranids, you can use paint thinner, and that will probably make it stay in one place better. Okay, so it's coming on. The next colour after we've done this, I'm going to be using Pink Horror, which is a darker pink. Because I'm just going to do the sort of connection between the carapace and the exoskeleton. Okay, so you can see it becoming pinker. The last parts to do really are the legs. I'm just making the last bit of this pink, and I'm going to be done that. I'm going to try and do these little leg parts. I tend to do these parts in darker. Carusberg's Crimson eventually. But obviously before we put the dark Carusberg Crimson on, we want to try and kill off the Ushabti Bone in there, in those areas. Okay, so I'm just looking inside here. It might need an extra little bit of a coat in the middle, sort of around that bit. Okay, so just looking at this bit, it's kind of a bit blotchy. So I'm going to try and scratch off a bit of that pink, which is still drying really, and blend it in a bit. So that's just a case of running the bristles on it until it comes off. So it's still drying. Okay, so that's pretty much done. I'm going to try and do the adrenal brain thing on the top. Same pink for that. You're probably going to use a bit of Bugman's Glow eventually, which is like a dark colour, but for now that part. That should be enough. On these miniatures, the Emperor's Children is probably one of the best colours you can put on it to start with. So the next colours we're going to use much more sparingly. So if you don't want to overkill it, the best one to do is this one. Just missed the tail. There's quite a lot of areas on this miniature which do require this colour. Now you can see that it's quite thick. Just there, the pigment's quite thick. So if the pigment's already thick, I tend to just put water on it and then just run it with it. And then maybe use your finger to scrape some of it off. Blend it in a bit. Okay, so that looks good to me. I still see the Screaming Skull underneath. And remember that this model hasn't completely only been undercoated in Screaming Skull. Screaming Skull isn't the undercoat. We used Ushabti Bone as the main colour, and then Screaming Skull is more like a sort of highlight. But obviously you do need to buy that paint. I don't think Ushabti Bone is quite the right colour. You can take them even lighter than Screaming Skull and use something like a white or Palid Witch Flesh. But I didn't on these ones because the ones that I've already done the white on, I think they actually look better in a bit more creamy Screaming Skull. I thought those ones came out better. Okay, so I'll bring out the Hive Tyrant that I've got with the white on, and you'll see that the white one is much more pale. Okay, so I'm going to contrast now the two Hive Tyrants in the different colours. So first of all, we've got the Winged Hive Tyrant. You can see I've used mainly, I've airbrushed it with a white as well, and you can see that it's very pale compared to the Screaming Skull one. Okay, hopefully you can see the difference. And I much prefer the Screaming Skull. This one did, on the one on the left did have Screaming Skull underneath it, and you might be able to see it in little pieces, but I think I just went a bit too hard with the white. Depends how light you want the Tyranids, really. The one on the left also isn't finished. I haven't done the purple on it yet, and the wings need another coat, and probably need to tidy up some of these areas around here. They need tidying up as well. Okay, so the next colour that we're going to be adding on is called Pink Horror. This is a darker pink. I'm going to use it to start with around here. Okay, so the next place I'm going to try is in the middle of the spine. Following from there, I'm going to try and do the back of the middle spine. And trying to get it pulled in the little holes. Following on from there, I'm going to try aim for the big holes on the tail. I'm just going to fill those up, the really big holes. Once I've done that, I'm going to do the same on the other side. These ones are harder to reach. Final area, probably I'm going to try and do the inside legs. Some holes there, fairly big ones. I'm just going to do them. I'm not going to do the whole leg. I'm mainly just aiming for the sort of inside dots. If you want to, you can do the legs. So these are sort of not really legs, these are more like the feet, ankles areas. Okay, so the final areas now. Just going to do the front, very thin line in pink horror. Okay, so the last colour that I'm going to use to do the sort of exoskeleton is Carusberg Crimson. And with this colour I'm going to start with just by doing around the ankles. So I've started with a finer brush. However, you might want to use a slightly bigger brush for these areas. This is a paint which is quite strong. Okay, so I want to use this paint quite sparingly. I'm going to try a little bit around this sort of gun vape part. Again, it is quite a strong paint, as we saw then. I think it works quite nicely if you scrape a bit off. Because it's just looking at this hand, I'm just going to do just a few little lines. And I didn't do completely the hand, I've just done a few lines there. Other areas that you want to do, okay, so it's quite a good, using it for a detailed rush works quite well, and you want to really do the very deep recesses. Notice that I'm leaving still some of that pink on there that we just spent the previous two colours doing. Okay, so the next stage is to coat the sort of carapace, which is the top part of the model, which is going to be coated in black. For this I'm using Vallejo Surface Primer. I just find that it's a bit more runny and it's very, very strong. You can use also Abaddon Black by Games Workshop. I'm going to use this first, and then after I've used it I'm going to go over it in Abaddon Black. Okay, so I've finished now undercoating the black parts in my Vallejo undercoat. I'm then going to paint on a little light coat of Abaddon Black. This is just to make it a bit more shiny and give it a very thin coat of that. So once that is done, I'm then going to go in with my finest brush that I've got. I have got some very, very fine brushes which I do for detail work, and I'm probably going to use the Naggorath Nightshade, I think it's called, then Genestealer Purple, and probably Xerous Purple as well. So that's to do the purple highlights on the carapace. So we'll go through that next after we've given it a very light coat of Abaddon Black. Okay, so now we have had the second coat of the Abaddon Black, or a black. So the next stage now is just going to add a very, very light coat of Naggorath Earthshade to these areas, but it's going to be the gloss one. So if you don't have the gloss one, I wouldn't bother doing it, but if you do have the gloss paint, I probably would go over this. The reason why I want to put a bit of Naggorath on it is just to give it a bit of a gloss effect for the carapace, otherwise it's going to be quite matte. Okay, so I've applied now the Naggorath Earthshade gloss. It's quite shiny, but obviously it's still drying. I think it works really well. I don't think it works as well if you apply this second. So after we've waited for this to dry, I'm going to be applying the purple highlights in 3 or 4 layers. I'd probably recommend doing the Naggorath first, because you want these purple layers still to be really popping. After we've done the purple layers, we're then going to do sort of the gun in a red, and we've also still got to do a bit more work on the sort of adrenal brain part, and obviously then finishing off any details around the face. Other things that need doing, this sword is going to be sort of a reddy colour, so I'm probably going to airbrush that on in around 3 colours and then put a nice highlight on it with a nice fine brush. So there's still a few things that need doing, and especially these feet as well. They're the same process as the sword, so I'm going to get those done next. I'm probably going to do the sword next, because if I have to touch up any areas, it'll be easier to do it first. So the next stage really is going to be now doing the sword, and to do that I usually start off with Khorne Red, so I'm going to airbrush Khorne Red onto that, then Mephiston Red, and then probably Evil Sun's Red, followed by a fine highlight. So I would recommend doing this with an airbrush because you want a nice gradient on it. Make sure when you do it with the airbrush you haven't got too much paint loaded in, because otherwise it might come out a bit, you might spray on too much onto the model. Okay, so far I've airbrushed it with Khorne Red, which this one is actually an airbrush paint that Games Workshop make. So this goes through the airbrush really nicely. So what I found was it wasn't splattering, so you can see it's quite a smooth consistency. I've just done it on the sword there and on the sort of headpiece, which is similar, and also the 2 little blades on the front of that. Now it's not coming out super clear on the camera, but it is there. So that's probably as far as I would go with the airbrush. The main reason is because you're probably going to have better control doing the rest of it with a brush. So the next stage is probably going to be Mephiston highlight, or maybe even a Wazdaka red highlight. So I'm going to consult the Pictures and Games Workshop website to see what colours I think I can see on there. Okay, so now I've gone over the sword and the sort of thing on its head, the horn, in a Mephiston Red highlight. So I've done this using the finest brush, one of the finest brushes that I've got. I'll show you the fineness of it in a second. And I've just gone over a first highlight on those areas. Okay, so this was the brush tip that I used. So quite a fine brush. Quite fine in comparison. So that's the fineness that I used. I think you could do it a bit finer if you wanted more control. I did it quite quick as well. So take your time with it. The next colour that I'm going to go over this in will be probably Squig Orange and Evil Sun's Red minorly. Okay, so I've done the Squig Orange highlight on these blades. You can see it on the sort of left bottom, so these areas down here and there, and also down here. And I did do it on the top as well, but since doing that, I've now gone on to just do the very tips, if you can get in focus, in a sort of Kislev Flesh, which is like an elf flesh kind of colour. So I've just done the elf flesh on the very top on here and here, and then underneath it is all Squig Orange. Okay, so looking at it as a whole now, we can see that we've got some highlights, and we can now progress on to the purple areas. So to start with the purple areas, I'm going to undercoat, well, fine line, sort of very fine streaks, but a lot of them, in Naggorath Night shade, which is like a dark purple base coat. Okay, so far everything has had the Naggorath Night fine highlighted areas. It's on this sort of black with the Agrax on, so you can't really see it, but all these areas have just had the Naggorath on, and any other black areas you can see. Now these areas here have also had the Xerous Purple on, sorry. So it goes Naggorath Night, and then we're going to add on Xerous Purple, and then the third highlight will be Genestealer Purple. So that's why these areas here just have a slight highlight on, sort of more purple. Okay, so this now has all of the Xerous Purple on there. The next colour I'm going to add is Genestealer Purple. Now this is quite a light purple, so I've taken a picture video of this before I add it, so you can see the difference. But obviously the next colour does need to be quite neat. Okay, so this was the brush that I used to do it, and the paintwork has been done quite nicely. I've gone with Genestealer Purple to do this third purple, and then the last highlight is all along the edges of the sort of blades, and that was done with Slaanesh Grey. Okay, so try to see the back as well. And you can still see that Agrax gloss underneath, but obviously because we're adding a matte paint on it to it, half of it is matte now. So I think that's given it quite a nice effect. The next stage is to do the gun, and then there's a bit of sort of fleshy colour to touch up around here, and then do the mouth and the eyes. After that, I'm probably just going to finish off these parts here and the feet with this similar sort of red technique, and then that model is pretty much finished. The other things that I can see on the Games Workshop version, they've introduced a bit of brown around here. So I probably won't do that because I want to keep mine quite nice and fleshy pinky colour. It's just that will tie in with the army and keep it all consistent. If I started adding browns on all of it, I think it will quickly become one of those Naggorath Earthshade armies where people just coat their miniatures in Naggoraths after base coats, whereas we don't want to be doing that. Okay, so I've just painted the gun over here in Khorne Red. I used the airbrush one again. This was hand painted though, so it was a very transparent layer. I gave it 2 coats, and while that's drying now, I'm just going to go over some of these darker areas just between the carapace and the exoskeleton, sort of the transition, and I'm going to use Screamer Pink to do this. So we're talking about these areas here. Okay, so that's the first little bit done. After I've done this, I'm going to wait for it to dry, and I'm going to use Carusberg Crimson or Naggorath Earthshade with a bit of gloss. What I'm trying to do is I'll show you on the computer, and I'm trying to get more of a transition and quite a dark transition to this part, rather than having it sort of a big join. The idea is to try and get rid of the sort of creamy parts just on this bit. Okay, so the other areas where this happens is down here. So I'm just going to try and keep it upside down while it's drying, because there's quite a bit of water in the paint. Okay, so we're going to have a look, and we can see a bigger blend on that area now. Just got to watch this bit here while it's drying. So, because I've put on the paint quite thick there, going to add a bit of water. Okay, so those layers are building up nicely. They need to really dry now, and then we need to be looking at adding a bit more either Carusberg Crimson or Naggorath Fleshshade in gloss. Okay, so what I've done now is I've just gone over these areas in Screamer Pink, watered down again. So there's quite a lot of water in it. And I've just gone over all these little things which pop out, which you can see popping out on more on it now. The reason why I did that was because looking at Games Workshop 1, and from a distance you could clearly see these areas as quite significant little details. So the next stage now is to add on Naggorath Fleshshade. So where I'm going to be applying this Naggorath Fleshshade is, and this is going to be a gloss one, I'm going to go for these areas here, just a few of those. I'm going to try it out. I'm not too keen on it, but so this will make the model quite dark in these places, which means we'll lose a lot of the pink. I think with this you definitely need to use a brush, and quite a fine detailed one. You don't want to be coating the model in Naggorath at this stage. Okay, because this is a gloss paint, a little bit of it in a very fine glaze would just make this part here go a bit glossy. So I think that would be good for it. I haven't gone for these areas here because I think they're quite nice in the pink. Otherwise we're just going to be overkilling this in Agrax. Okay, so that's probably enough Agrax for me. The next colour that I'm going to try might be Seraphim Sepia. I'm just going to try this out, but it might not be one that I end up using. Okay, so I still haven't added on the Seraphim Sepia yet, but I'm now leaning more towards a Cassandora Yellow. I think before I add this final shade on, I'm actually going to do the Palid Witch Flesh highlight. So the next things really to do are to tidy up the gun, and you can also see now that I've added on the Bugman's, I think it's called Bugman's Glow. Okay, so I've added on a base now with some light sand, which is sold by Games Workshop. So I used PVA glue to attach the sand to the base, and then I coated it all in Typhus Corrosion. So you can use Rhinox Hide, which is a dark brown, but I actually find that the Typhus Corrosion, what that does is it goes on very nicely onto the sand area, and then once you've done the brown, then I add more Steel Legion Drab, which is this colour. It's like I do a light dry brush on that, and I also go around the base. That round the rim of the base also needs another coat to get it a bit thicker, but while it's building up and drying, we do that. After you've done your Steel Legion Drab dry brush onto the Rhinox Hide or Typhus Corrosion, I then apply Mournfang Brown and finally Tyrant Skull. So there's 3 dry brush layers to do onto the sand, and also do the rim of the base in Steel Legion Drab. The other things that I've done is I've added on Bugman's Glow to the adrenal glands, so here, and also these parts here, and a few of these raised areas here. Now, with these regions here, I've watered the Bugman's Glow to about 50-50 consistency, and then I've just lightly glazed these areas so it didn't have to redo the shading where the Screamer Skull already was. Sorry, not Screaming Skull. I think it's this like Screamer Pink already was. So the only regions where I directly painted Bugman's Glow on were around these parts and that part there. These parts were more watered down, and obviously we've painted the tongue. So the next things to do on this miniature are to give this base another coat at the end around those areas. The other things that need doing is this whip probably needs more of a gradient on it. So we're going to have a look at using some different flesh tones around here to create a gradient on the whip. I'm going to use Khorne Red watered down to do these adrenal glands like a nice shade in the recesses. I'm also going to use a red pinky colour for the tongue, a few coats on that, and then a nice glaze. And then I'm going to use do some work on the teeth, the eye, and a nice blue on the vein on their brain. After that's done, I'm then going to work back into the gun using probably a Mephiston Red and a few shades. to get that popping. Okay, so I've pretty much finished the model now. The last touches that I added were obviously, I know I've added another coat around the base. I probably have to have another coat after that because the paint was coming off as I was doing the last touches to the model. Just gonna get a paintbrush. So as you can see now, around here, I started off, obviously it was just undercoated in Screaming Skull. After I'd done the Screaming Skull, which was already on there, I added a bit of Kislev Flesh. I used mainly the paint for this part, and then I started watering it down and blending it into the Screaming Skull at the top. So by the time it got to this point, it was mainly quite watery. After I'd done that, I let that dry, and I added on Cadian Flesh, which I haven't got it on the table, but this is the Kislev Flesh that I added. Then I used Cadian Flesh around here, but not much Cadian Flesh, just a tad. And then finally I added on the Reikland Fleshshade to just pick out these recesses. Now, one of my good tips that I found when I was doing this model towards the end was I added Khorne Red, the airbrush paint with quite a lot of water, to be honest, and this brush has picked out just a few of these little crevices around here in Khorne Red, and I also added on Khorne Red to these parts, but very, very lightly. And what that did is it really brings the gun into the sort of exoskeleton, because then it's in that colour as well. So you can see these parts here have got a bit of Khorne Red in as well now, but obviously you don't want to overkill. I didn't do these ones up here. This gun, the eye in the gun is done with Averland Sunset. Okay, and then I added a tiny dot of black and then 2 lines above and below. Once I'd done that, I did a bit of experimentation on this colour. I added Mephiston Red watered down originally as a wash. That didn't really work. After I'd done that, I added in Reikland Fleshshade. Reikland Fleshshade mainly kills things off. It's a bit of a abrupt paint to use. I found from painting this model, the best techniques that I can think of were really not completely staying away. I think the Naggorath Earthshade gloss is very good, but you don't really want to overuse those. You're better off using watered down paints. So like Emperor's Children, Pink Horror, Screaming Skull, not Screaming Skull, Screamer Pink, different ones like that worked well. The adrenal glands, I did, like I said, the Khorne Red watered down. Then I did Mephiston Red watered down to get it even redder. Same with these parts over here, same technique. And finally, very light Reikland, just little tiny dots of that. Again, with this bit, I added in a bit of Kislev Flesh to bring that up a gear. These pipes here. And finally added tiny bits of Nihilakh Oxide, which is a technical paint, to these areas here. After I'd done that, I did the teeth in White Scar, and the tongue. The tongue could really be done a bit redder, but I've started it off in Mephiston Red watered down. So there's a Mephiston Red watered down on that, and there's Bugman's Glow underneath. And then the black, obviously just black inside the mouth, nothing too fancy there. And then if you Squig Orange again on that, there's not too much glazes on the gun, it's mainly just Khorne Red still. So it's really about mixing the colours up. The last things to do in this miniature, obviously the feet and these little spikes, which again, they just need to be done in a sort of red. We've probably already covered that colour before. So I'm going to now progress on to some proper photographs and videos of this miniature on a turn display. If you like this video, please give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. Okay, so there we have the finished Hive Tyrant. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now you might be wondering what else is on the channel. So the main focus of this channel, although we are doing painting videos at the moment, is actually battling and tactical decisions. So we're taking a fresh approach to how to play Warhammer, and that means that we're going to be using very, very technical mathematics to model algorithms to actually play Warhammer. So this is a pretty hardcore mathematical channel on how to play and win Warhammer 40k. It's a bit like Math Hammer, but it's a lot more real world and it's got a lot more application. So you might be also wondering, how are we getting real world into Warhammer? So the main reason why we can do this is because we're using financial markets to place the Warhammer players. So what that means is, for example, now say you have two currencies, such as maybe euros and dollars. So the euros can be interpreted as maybe space marines, and the dollars can be maybe interpreted as a different type of army, such as Tyranids or Tau or Orcs or whatever you want to play it as. So we then use how the derivative is changing, so that is the financial derivative, which is the price of the underlying currency or the ratio of euros to dollars. As that changes throughout the day, we then change the players in the game. So these are very, very, very large games, and we're using a lot of computer software to generate these games in real time, which will then be streamed onto our YouTube channel. So what we're really doing at the moment is painting up our miniature range and getting people interested in our channel for the future. So the best is yet to come, and we are looking forward to starting the live stream in the next couple of weeks.